4 people living under the same roof are now behind bars after an infant was found clinging to life inside an alleged Florida house of horrors.
The property smells very strongly of like animal feces and urine, so I can't imagine what it's like inside.
We are getting a fuller picture of the home's horrific conditions directly from local television station Action News Jax as they visit the property and speak with neighbors.
Frankly, I think if they'd been living out in the woods as feral children, they would have probably been in a much cleaner, safer environment than what they were in this home.
Imagine stepping into a home where the air doesn't just smell of neglect, it burns your throat, a chemical blend of ammonia from old urine, and the sickly sweet rot of feces that's been baking in the Florida heat. And the first thing you notice, before your eyes can even adjust to the dim, fly-specked interior, is a sound, not the cry of the 6-week-old baby who has become the center of a nightmare in Putnam County, Florida, but the low, constant, sickening buzz of thousands of flies swarming over a filthy mattress on the floor where a child sleeps, a mattress so stained and saturated with God knows what that.
Oh, it wasn't until you got to the front door, and when you got to the door, you're just automatically hit with the smell of pet urine, ammonia. You step in and you're just stepping into swarms of flies just throughout the house. And I mean, I've never seen so many flies in one place in my life. It was just bad. You just walked through every room, just had swarms of flies. The 2 adults and the juvenile slept in the living room, and the juvenile was sleeping on a mattress, and that mattress had swarms of flies. Just around the mattress. So I don't know how that kid was able to sleep out at all. And then you just keep going into the house, and it just gets worse and worse and worse, just going through it.
It has become a breeding ground, a living carpet of filth, and right there in that living room where the infant's grandparents, Melissa and John Keel, slept on couches surrounded by garbage, you realize that the phrase unimaginable conditions doesn't even scratch the surface of what law enforcement uncovered behind closed doors on July 28th.
In custody in this case. So I want to fast forward a week later. We're on July 28th now, and the Putnam County SWAT team and detectives with the Putnam County Sheriff's Office served a search warrant for Jody Cannon's house. And based on information they received from DCF and other resources about the alleged unsafe conditions that the infant child was living in, they had to move in. And when law enforcement arrived at the home, they discovered even more people had been living there aside from Jody Cannon and her children. And the sheriff told me that he believes that a total of
when a
4
SWAT team
children
and detectives executed a search warrant and found a baby who just weeks earlier had been literally clinging to life in a hospital's pediatric intensive care unit with a heart rate so low and a body temper so dangerously depressed that doctors said without immediate intervention, the infant would have easily died. This is the case of Jody Cannon, a 26-year-old mother who admitted to smoking marijuana throughout her pregnancy and whose newborn tested positive for THC at birth.
Information about how long they believe potentially the conditions were like this in this home. So let's jump right into this case. This all begins July 7th of this year. And according to police, the Department of Children and Families, DCF, conducted a follow-up visit at the home involving a 6-week-old infant male. Now, the reason for the follow-up was this infant was allegedly born with marijuana in his system as well as kratom. The police report cites medical experts explaining that infants exposed to those substances are at great risk for strokes, cardiac arrhythmias, respiratory distress, and compromise, impaired neurocognitive development, and severe withdrawal symptoms. So it makes sense that DCF wanted to keep a close eye on this.
Triggering a Department of Children and Families follow-up visit on July 7, a visit that saved the child's life when the caseworker noticed the baby was catastrophically underweight, having lost a staggering 600 grams, over a pound, since birth. And when DCF insisted on taking the infant to the emergency room, the mother refused.
Now, because of the alleged malnourished state of Cannon's son, DCF advised Cannon that they would take her and the infant to the emergency room. But Cannon reportedly declined. And that is when DCF reportedly took matters into their own hands and called first responders because this baby needed immediate medical attention. Here's what police said happened at the hospital. Quote, once at the ER, there were positive findings of medical neglect. The infant required PICU admission due to low heart rate, low body temperature, and low weight. Without DCF's intervention, on July 7th, the infant could have easily died. There were also positive findings of failure to thrive. The infant lost 600 grams, which is around 1.3 pounds, between birth and 6 weeks of age,
forcing authorities to bypass her altogether and transport the baby themselves, a decision that peeled back the curtain on a house of horrors where 4 adults and 4 children existed in a state of degradation so profound that the sheriff, Gator DeLoach, a man with 25 years in law enforcement,
this house. How would you characterize, and we've seen some pictures from the outside, what did you see when you went in the door?
Honestly, Chris, I wish we were able to share the pictures with you from the interior of the residence. I can tell you, in 25 years of being in law enforcement, this is probably one of the most profound child neglect cases I have ever seen in my career. And I think Chris can probably attest to that as well. He's been doing this for a long time. So I'll let Chris go into some of the details, but just a brief chronology. This
called it one of the most profound child neglect cases he had ever witnessed, a living situation so abhorrent that he later told me, without hyperbole, that the children would have been cleaner and safer living as feral creatures in the woods than inside that dwelling. And that statement, as wild as it sounds,
especially when you think of the 4 children who were living inside. Quote, the entryway led to the living room, which is where the infant's grandparents, Melissa and John Keel, slept on couches. The juveniles slept on a filthy mattress on the floor. There was an infestation of flies, not only in the living room, but also in the kitchen and hallway. The flies were also swarming the area where the juvenile was sleeping. As we continued, animal feces and urine were very visible on the floor. On one spot of the floor, near a washer and dryer, were fresh animal feces with another swarm of flies surrounding it. The kitchen, the sink, had a large number of soiled pots and pans that had not been cleaned for a large amount of time. Under the sink, the pipes had leaked at some point, which caused the wood floor to rot with signs of mold showing. The roof above the dining room had been patched but was structurally not sound, according to code enforcement. The ceiling that had mold on it had been
borne out by
over.
every single detail. In the police reports, the floor near the washer and dryer was slick with fresh animal feces. The kitchen sink was piled with pots and pans so caked with old food that they hadn't been cleaned in what looked like weeks or months. The refrigerator contained barely any edible food, but did emit an odor so foul it nearly made a SWAT team member vomit.
And it really just gets worse. Quote, the residents had a refrigerator in the kitchen that had barely enough food for all 4 people to eat. There were also bugs and a strong unhealthy odor coming from inside the refrigerator that almost made a SWAT team member vomit. A second stand-up freezer in the kitchen was empty, but also had a strong odor coming from inside. Now, due to the disgusting conditions allegedly uncovered, an unsafe structure placard was placed on the home, and the remaining child, Melissa and John Keel's adoptive son, was placed into DCF custody. The Putnam County Sheriff's
When you
Office
opened the freezer, empty, yet somehow reeking, it was clear that the stench was not just a surface problem, but something that had permeated the very walls. The rotting wood floor beneath a leaky pipe, the ceiling that had been patched with plywood after a hurricane 3 years prior, a patch job that trapped black mold in the attic and simply painted over the visible evidence on the dining room ceiling, leaving toxic spores to drift down onto the children who played and slept underneath. And if you can for a moment, hold that picture in your mind. The mold, the flies, the urine-soaked floors
had been painted over with white paint. As law enforcement continued searching the home, they discovered the only usable bathroom was allegedly in disrepair, and the floor under the sink was rotting with water damage. As for the bedroom, the infant's father, Jordan Wilson, was allegedly using, police described its conditions as cluttered and deplorable, with flies and cockroaches seen throughout the bedroom. Police said the room was unsanitary for a juvenile due to used dinner dishes found on the floor of a dresser for an unknown length of time. And it really just gets
cockroaches
worse.
Scuttling across used dinner dishes left in the father, Jordan Wilson's bedroom, where his own infant child might crawl. And then consider that this was not a sudden disaster, but a slow motion collapse that neighbors had watched for years, reporting matted dogs locked outside without food or
Imagine
water.
What it's like inside. There comes a point where we need to realize that some people are just evil people and shouldn't be allowed to have children.
The neighbor also told Action News Jax that several nearby residents allegedly called CPS because of the home and property's conditions, and she's made attempts to also contact animal control after allegedly witnessing several dogs locked outside the property without food or water for days. along with several matted dogs running up and down the street. Putnam County Animal Services responded to the television station with a statement explaining they responded to the home, and at the time, its residents eventually
calling Child Protective Services, phoning animal control, noticing a smell so aggressive it wafted from the property, and made them feel physically ill when they stood too close. And yet, despite those calls, despite DCF's own earlier involvement after the baby's birth, 4 children remained inside until the baby almost died, and that is the monstrous reality at the heart of this story. The system had hooks in this family, a paper trail existed, and it still took a 6-week-old's body shutting down in a hospital before the other 3 children were pulled from that biological fallout zone. And when you dig into the psychology of the 4 adults now facing felony charges, the excuses they gave investigators reveal something more complex than pure laziness. Although Sheriff DeLoach rightly called it pure unadulterated laziness, because there were cleaning supplies in the home.
I know this may go well beyond what that bar may be, but when it gets to the point where you feel like you have probable cause for a neglect case.
Well, some of what we've already highlighted, just the failure to keep the home in a safe environment. There was literally no food there for the children. They weren't being cared for. And here's the reality of it. This is nothing more than a case of pure unadulterated laziness. If you go through and you actually look at some of the photos, you can see cleaning supplies in the home. So they had the means and the ability to clean this place up, and they were just lazy.
Was there any prior interaction?
I guess what
with
started was a hurricane about 3 years ago that tore a hole in the roof. And instead of getting it professionally repaired, they just put a tarp over it, and the tarps ended up leaking. And I got a video from a third party that showed the water just coming out of the ceiling down the drapes into buckets. And when DCF went back in, I think one of their earlier visits, they took pictures of the drapes, and the drapes had mold on it, black mold. And so they actually patched the ceiling with plywood and then painted over the mold. But if you're familiar with black mold, it's all in the attic on the roof joists and all that. So they didn't get it professionally removed. If you don't get it professionally removed, it's going to just continue to grow no matter what you do. So they were very aware of how bad that house was.